Have you ever just stopped and thought about frogs? I mean, really thought about them? They're incredible. One minute they're hopping around on land, and the next, they're swimming deep underwater. It's like they're living a double life. How in the world can one little animal be built for two completely different worlds? Well, that's the exact puzzle we're going to solve together today. So this is the big question, right? For us humans, it's simple. We have one way to get oxygen, our lungs. That's it. But a frog? A frog needs a system that works perfectly in the open air and when it's completely submerged in water. So what's its secret? All right, here's our game plan. First, we'll dive into the breathing puzzle itself. Then we'll uncover the frog's 3 amazing breathing superpowers. After that, we'll get into the cool science behind it all, called diffusion. We'll see how a frog chooses the right method, why staying wet is a matter of life and death, and finally, how its triple strategy makes it a master of survival. Just like you and me, frogs are complex animals. They're made of millions and millions of tiny cells. And every single one of those cells has a basic need. It needs to breathe to get energy and stay alive. This whole process is called gas exchange. And this is where it gets really interesting. While we humans are stuck with our lungs, frogs came up with a secret strategy. They didn't just find one solution. They figured out a way to completely master both land and water. So what is this big secret? Well, it turns out frogs have not 1, not 2, but 3 different ways to breathe. We're going to call them their 3 breathing superpowers: their lungs, their skin, and, believe it or not, the inside of their mouth. Remember this number, 3. It's the magic number. It is the absolute key to understanding how a frog can be so incredibly adaptable. So let's break down each of these superpowers one by one. Okay, first up is the one we're all familiar with. Lungs. Yup, frogs have lungs, and they work in a way that's pretty similar to our own. But as you'll see, there are some really important differences in when they use them. So, a frog pulls air in through its nose, it goes to the lungs, oxygen goes into the blood, and carbon dioxide comes out. Simple enough. But here's the twist. Frogs mostly use their lungs when they need a big burst of energy. Like when they're hopping around and being really active on land. All right, get ready for the most surprising superpower of all. It's skin. That is not a typo. A frog can literally breathe right through its skin. In fact, this is how a frog does most of its breathing. A frog's skin is super thin, and it's packed with tiny blood vessels really close to the surface. This setup allows oxygen to pass directly from the air or the water right into its blood. And you know that slimy feeling? That's mucus, and its job is to keep the skin wet so it can keep breathing. This is the frog's go-to method when it's just chilling out or hiding underwater. And that brings us to superpower number 3. Think of this one as a helpful backup. Frogs can actually absorb oxygen through the moist lining inside their mouths, and the air doesn't even have to go to their lungs. Think of this as a little power-up. Just by holding air in its mouth, a frog can grab some extra oxygen that goes straight into the blood vessels right there. It's not its main way of breathing, but it's a super useful trick that helps out the other 2, especially when the frog is rusting. So we have lungs, skin, and the mouth lining. But how does the oxygen actually move from the outside to the inside? Well, all 3 of these superpowers are powered by the same scientific engine, a simple process called diffusion. Now, diffusion might sound like a complicated science word, but the idea behind it is super simple. Imagine a really crowded room where everyone is packed together. What do people do? They naturally spread out into the less crowded spaces. Well, molecules do the exact same thing. They always move from a place where there's a lot of them, a high concentration, to a place where there are fewer of them, a low concentration. So let's apply that to the frog. The air and water outside the frog have a high concentration of oxygen. There's tons of it. But inside the frog's blood, there's a low concentration. So diffusion naturally pulls that oxygen in. At the same time, the frog's blood is full of waste, carbon dioxide, while the air outside isn't. So diffusion pushes the carbon dioxide out. It's a perfect, automatic exchange that happens all by itself. Okay, so a frog has this amazing toolkit with 3 awesome ways to breathe. But how does it know which tool to use and when? Well, it's all about strategy. A frog is a really smart strategist. It doesn't just use these methods randomly, no way. Its choice depends completely on what it's doing and where it is at that exact moment. It's constantly adapting. Let's look at the frog's playbook here. When it's resting quietly, You can see its skin is the star player. It's doing most of the work. But when it's super active on land, jumping around, the lungs take over as the major source of power. And what if it's completely underwater? It relies almost entirely on its skin. The frog automatically picks the best tool for the job every single time. Now, two of these three amazing superpowers, the skin and the mouth, depend on one critical thing, a wet surface. And this leads us to the frog's one big weakness. It's kryptonite, if you will. This is the single most important rule to remember about a frog's life. Diffusion, that magic process we talked about, needs a wet surface to work. So a frog with dry skin can actually suffocate, even if it's surrounded by air full of oxygen. This means there are two huge dangers for a frog. First, just drying out. If a frog is stuck in the hot sun for too long, it's in big trouble. Second, pollution. Because its skin is so thin and absorbent, it's like a sponge for any chemicals in the water or air. Those chemicals can damage the skin and stop breathing altogether. This is why the health of frogs can tell us a lot about the health of our environment. Okay, let's bring this all together. What does this incredible breathing system really mean for the frog? Well, it means everything. It is the absolute key to its survival. By having three different tools in its toolbox, the frog becomes a master of flexibility. It has a solution for life on land, a solution for life in the water, a high-energy mode, and a low-energy mode. This triple strategy is a perfect example of how animals adapt to not just survive, but to thrive in their environment. And that leaves us with a final thought. The frog faced a huge problem, how to live in two completely different worlds, and it solved it. Not with one single perfect solution, but with three different ones that all work together as a team. So, what can this incredible master of adaptation teach us about how we solve the complex problems in our own world? Thanks for joining this explainer.